What food app do you guys recommend for tracking in terms of nutrient accuracy and whatnot? Or just in general, I guess something that might be useful to listeners is like, what do you guys have on your phones? Unless you use paper, which would be wild, but I'd love to hear. And then what do your athletes prefer most that you've seen?
Yeah, my athletes love MacroFactor. They absolutely love it. And I've never even seen MacroFactor, to be honest with you. However, I will say of all of the tracking, because all those tracking apps, they kind of like gauge your expenditure and they kind of give you some sort of a comparison as far as what you ate versus expenditure and they give you, MyFitnessPal was famous for that. These are how many calories you can eat, to match your expenditure, and things like that. They all suck except for MacroFactor. I mean, they all way overestimate. They way overestimate what your expenditure is. But with MacroFactor, I mean, I'm old fashioned. I like to do things by hand. I like to compare, okay, this is what your body weight's done over the last 4 weeks. This has been your average intake, and then I'll calculate it all from there. And time again, I've used my methods and good old fashioned arithmetic, calculated things myself, said this is what you should take in to lose a pound or a half a pound or whatever our target weight loss is per week. They'll plug that into MacroFactor and it's the same thing. And I've even, in 1 or 2 cases, just basically coached people, say, okay, we need to pick it up here a little bit, turn MacroFactor up to, losing a pound a week or pound and a half a week. And I'll be damned if it doesn't end up 4 weeks later, they lost 4 pounds or they lost 6 pounds, or whatever it was that we were targeting. That's what my athletes love. I will say that at least so far, I'm mildly impressed with how it works.
Okay.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, I was a MyFitnessPal guy for many, many years. I had a streak of, I want to say, 1,250 some days in a row of tracking way back in like 15, 16, 17. I hate it anymore. Just because the tracking app that I use now, which I'll get to here in a second, I can just put in the grams of how much food that I'm eating and boom, it tells me what my macros and my calories are. And unless MyFitnessPal has changed, you have to figure out the servings. So if something is a 4-ounce serving and I've got 156 grams, I have to figure out how many servings that is. And that drove me nuts. And for that reason, when I first got on the Fit Genie kick, I loved the fact that I could just put in 156 grams and it would figure it out for me. Right now, I just use the cheap little app that came with my my Fitbit, my little Fitbit Inspire 2. However, one caveat I will say is that because of the rounding of labels, the calories that come out of my spreadsheet that are based on the arithmetic of 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate and protein and 9 calories per gram of fat, they don't match. The calories don't match. So that's why I kind of more so focus on calorie ranges, and even with the rounding, as long as you're in your calorie range, I always end up getting the weight loss or the weight gain that I was after for the athlete and for myself, whether it was gaining, or losing. So yeah, that's my rant on tracking apps.
Yeah. A good one. It's a good one. What do you got, Brian?
I agree with everything you said there. Yeah, I've messed around with MacroFactor. Yeah, I really like it as a tracking app. I think it makes things very easy, and you can, enter grams, like you had said, Brad, which is, or was, probably still is, super annoying about MyFitnessPal, and it's the reason I never really used it for a sustained period. And it's funny, I don't know if you remember, Brad, it was like 2011, maybe. It was my first prep when I was working with Berto. Jason Lowy, he created My Macros Plus. And I don't know if he was one of... Do you? I
My
still
Macros
use it.
Plus? Yeah.
So I think at one point he had, like, in the 3DMJ HQ at the time on Facebook, had like looked for people to test it out, and I had volunteered, and I love it. To this day, I still think it's for what it is, the easiest. Like, it's not a coaching tool, really. I mean, I think it can be. I think there's an option to do that, like self-guided coaching based off of weigh-ins and stuff. But it does things down to the gram, like you said. They have a feature called like Fast Track, where, like, let's say I had a bag of, chips or something, and I wanted to log those or whatever. We'll say, it's not something I normally eat, and I don't have it saved in my phone. You can just do what's called Fast Track, where you don't even have to write what it is. Just enter the macros that are on the label and just add it to the day. And I use that a lot. Sometimes it's easier than just looking up the food, to be honest, if I'm eating the same amount as usual. One thing I don't like about some of the like coaching elements within these apps is, and I don't want to speak on behalf of all of them, but it does seem like on average, a lot of them adjust things prematurely. And, so it's like you might have more sodium for 4 consecutive days than usual, but be within your caloric limits. And then all of a sudden your calories are reduced the next week. And so I think it can, psychologically, I think that can be hard for some people. It's like you're constantly getting things adjusted. And I think it can make the weight loss experience, if we're talking about weight loss here, like seem more complicated than it needs to be for some people, where it's like pull back by this amount, or, pull back 12 grams of fat, or, whatever it is. So I love the tracking abilities of a lot of these apps, with the exception of MyFitnessPal. But I got to plug My Macros Plus. It's a good
Nice.
one. And it's cheap too. I think it's like $4 in the App Store. And I think they have a barcode scanner that doesn't cost money. That's the other thing that sucks about MyFitnessPal. Doesn't that cost money now? The barcode
I
scanner?
don't know. I was on the free. I mean, I only bodybuilded for like 5 or 6 years, but the whole time I was on free.
I think within the past few years,
MyFitnessPal.
I want to say
something changed with MyFitnessPal that really caused a little bit of an upscrew with a lot of people.
I think the barcode scanner, you have to pay each month to use it, and I don't think it's cheap. So yeah, that type of stuff. But the nice thing about some of these other apps, like My Macros Plus, is you don't have to worry about the rounding errors. Like, they have a nutrition database that you can use, but for most people, I just have them, they're consuming the same 20, 30 foods day in and day out.
Yeah.
It's like, just do the legwork up front, make sure it's accurate, and then you don't have to worry about these rounding issues that are giving you headaches. Because I'll get that question a lot, like, how come MyFitnessPal doesn't match what we have in the spreadsheet?
Brad has a blog at 3dmusclejourney.com all about this.
Do you on that? Okay.
Yeah, on that very subject.
Why your tracker doesn't match your...
Yeah. And the ones that deduct the fiber from the carbohydrate,
that
worst. Will drive people insane. And yours truly has fallen victim to that.
Yeah, and I think on MyFitnessPal too, you could enter like just a random calorie amount, and then enter macros that don't even remotely
match.
And it'll default to the calories rather than the macros. And so it's the database there. I'm sure it's gotten a lot better, but it's like, different entries for the same thing, and some people are just being blissfully ignorant. And I think when they select them, it's like, which piece of pizza has
the lowest amount of calories? I'm going to pick that one.
Exactly. So you want to avoid that.
It also, in this question, particularly in terms of food nutrients accuracy.
So the one, and I haven't used this personally, but I've heard Chronometer is really good for that. Have you used that, Brad?
Mm-mm. I've heard of it, but I've never used it.
I've heard it's great for like the micronutrient aspect of things. I'm not sure if they have an app or not. But that was what I was gonna suggest.
Okay.
I will say that for most of the apps, at least the common nutrients seem to be pretty darn accurate. Sodium, cholesterol, things like that. It seems like most of those are pretty good. And it's hard to mess those up.
At least according to the labels. Yeah.
Correct. Exactly.
Okay. But either way, like for y'all's athletes, it goes into a spreadsheet that auto calculates calories for y'all, for the listener, if you're curious. Like it's not like, I know Brad, you're probably, when you say like adjust your macro factor to 1 pound, like that's, I would imagine your off season, occasional check-in client, not like when you're prepping, you guys have reporting via spreadsheet that you are in charge of the
for sure, because I'm old and stubborn. And so, while I will tell them to adjust their macro factor, I still make them transpose and do all that data entry of their macronutrients into my spreadsheet.
It's
it allows me to do my job the best I can. And serve my athlete.
Across clients, then you have like the same.
I have uniformity. Right. I can make decisions easier that way and better decisions. So that's all important too.
Especially in something like prep where you can hit plateaus and weight loss a bit more frequently that might not be a result of being at maintenance intake.
Right.
You know, it can just be a stress water retention issue.
Like, it can be a lot of things.
Yeah. So one thing you want to, like, and I don't know how many of these apps actually do this, but it's like if somebody hits a wall, it's like, okay, do we need to adjust? Like some of these apps may adjust because they didn't lose any weight, or maybe they gained weight and they're going to adjust even further.
Premature, like you said.
Yeah. So
I hate it when they jump the gun. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in situations like that, like on the spreadsheet, I'll look at the rate of loss, like in the 3-4 weeks preceding that. Right. And if everything's been going smooth and then we just kind of seem to hit this abrupt wall, then assuming, compliance has been there, then there's really no reason to believe all of a sudden the deficit would just immediately shut the door on somebody, So it's like, okay, well, let's use the trends in the data. Let's play a game of chicken a little bit. And 8 times out of 10, I'd say you're going to break through if you have information that kind of pushes you to that decision, that supports that. So I think a lot of them adjust prematurely, and I think it's hard. It's a hard thing for an algorithm to capture when you're talking about something like prep specifically, when there can be so many different. It's not a normal
body.
Mm-hmm, like digestion. It's like, okay, well,
they haven't shit in 3 days.
You've been constipated for 5 days.
Exactly. Yeah.
Guess what? Here's 500 less calories.
Yeah.
Keep it all in there. Yeah.
And as practitioners, there's things that we can do that algorithms cannot do. We're getting pictures every week. And if an athlete tells me that this dimple on my arm is getting deeper every single week, how come I'm not losing weight? Well, I don't know why you're not losing weight, but you're getting leaner. And that's the important thing. And no, we're not going to adjust, Measurements every now and then. I did a prep last year that was all measurements. I mean, the person didn't lose a pound for like the last 5-6 weeks of prep, but their measurements were getting smaller around their waist and around their thighs. And those are the kind of practitioner type things that we all have access to and knowledge of how to compare that algorithms cannot. And like you said, Brian, because you haven't dropped anything but like a quarter of a pound over the last 5 weeks, here, let's just take away all these calories and over diet you, and then you lose more muscle,
So I think they have a lot, those apps have a ton of utility for a lot of people. But I think there's situations where
prep being one of them
where there's probably a better approach. I think.
So it sounds like you'll have lots of options for tracking and maybe not so many good options for coachability in terms of the apps.
I would say that. It's going to sound biased because we're a coaching company, but I don't have enough.
No, but y'all have explained why.
I've explained why, but I haven't done every single app that's out there, but I've gotten feedback on a number of them, and that does seem to be sort of a common theme.
Right. Okay.
So it depends, like everything.
Like everything else.